Welcome to another edition of Cowboys Cast. I'm your host, Bobby Belt. It has been 208 days since Des Bryant caught the ball at Lambeau Field. With me on the phone this week, we have Josh Wingate. Josh, how are you?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And RJ, how are you?
I'm doing great, Bobby. Thanks for asking.
And I just realized I just said RJ as if it's just so easily first name. It's Josh Wingate and RJ Ochoa with us. Coming up here in the third segment, we're going to have a camp report live from Oxnard from the great Dan Turner from NFL Draft Zone. And recently added to his bio is contributor at DallasCowboys.com, which is very exciting. And, you'll want to read his stuff over there. He's doing a lot of great work for DallasCowboys.com during training camp. But first, we're going to kick off with this Chargers-Cowboys game that's coming up in the next week. We're actually not going to have another episode recorded until after the game. And so this is our chance to kind of preview a little bit, talk about what we'd like to see and, what we expect from the Cowboys in this first preseason game. Now, everybody knows the first preseason game is fairly meaningless. I mean, the starters will all play one series, maybe. Outside of that, you're just going to see a lot of the young guys and a lot of the guys trying to make the roster really, taking up the majority of the game. It's not always pretty football, but it's football, and we should be excited about that. And so I guess the first question that's, for both of you, but I'll lead off with you, Josh, is what are you most wanting to see out of this first game against the Chargers? What would you most like to see? Because it's a little difficult to set, certain goals in the first preseason game. It's more just, some inclinations and some indicators of things that you'd like to see moving forward. But what would you like to see out of this first game?
The first game, I want to see if we actually do have a pass rush because, you can't really tell against our offensive line. You could put an all-star team against them, and I feel like they just block them completely. And I will say I'm having a lot of fun seeing Greg Hardy try against Tyron Smith. But I also want to see the running game, see how that's going, see if we have any stars in the making. And I want to see that second team offensive line as well, see what they have, because I don't think it's too good right now, and I want them to prove me wrong.
Now, it will be interesting, this first game against the Chargers. It doesn't look like Darren McFadden's going to play. As you mentioned, you want to kind of see what comes from the running game. It doesn't look like we'll have two of the three contenders. I don't think Darren McFadden's going to play. It's a question about how available Lance Dunbar is going to be after hurting his ankle on Wednesday. I saw Mickey Spagnola tweeted that the MRI came back negative, but, it's still a sprained ankle, and you wonder how much the Cowboys will want him out there on the field. So we may only see Joseph Randle of the three. But, RJ, what are you looking for in this first game in terms of indicators and things you'd like to see from the second team and the coaching staff and things like that?
I really want to see the backup quarterbacks. I want to see Brandon Weeden, and I want to see Dustin Vaughn, and I'm a little bit curious about Showers and see what they can do. If Dustin Vaughn can play at an elite level, maybe not elite, but a legitimate level, we might have to carry an extra offensive lineman, an extra running back, extra linebacker. That roster spot can be saved by not having to carry three quarterbacks. And so I want to see Dustin Vaughn earn that job. Brandon Weeden, he didn't play that great in the limited action that we saw of him last year. I know he threw a touchdown in the Colts game.
But to be fair, he is a reserve quarterback. You always want somebody who can step in and play, but we can't expect. There's always going to be a drop off. So that's just one thing to think about. Go ahead, continue.
Right, obviously. But if Dustin Vaughn can beat him out, all right. We can save that roster spot. Each one is so precious and so valuable. And like Josh said, I want to see the second team offensive line. I want to see what Lyle Collins is made of. I want to see him out there against some other NFL competition. The guy had a first-round grade on him. I know Dan Turner, among other people, had him rated that high. And I want to see what he's got. I want to see how he can perform, when it matters and when everybody's, coming for him. Because he's a big target. He's a big name. And so I want to see how those guys kind of mature together, him and the rest of the secondary line.
And I think the Lyle Collins point, that's both something you guys would both like to see. That's something I'd like to see as well. Not just how he performs. I'll be interested to see if the Cowboys at all during the game run him out there and play tackle. Just to kind of see if maybe he's a better fit there. I know that's where he wanted to play when he first came out of college. I don't know if that's still a desire of his. Maybe he's been swayed on, what a powerhouse the Cowboys think he can be as a guard. But I'd be interested to see if he gets any reps at right tackle or if it's going to be strictly at guard. I'll tell you the thing I'm looking forward to is not just La'el Collins, but it's the other two of the big draft picks that we got. Collins not being a draft pick, but somebody we got through the draft. And the other two are Byron Jones and Randy Gregory for completely different reasons. First, with Byron Jones, I want to see two things. I want to see, A, does he take any reps at safety, which, goodness, I hope not. B, I want to see what kind of ability he shows in coverage. I want to see how frequently he's put in man as opposed to zone. I'm just interested to see very early on, clearly not getting into too much strategy in the first game of preseason, but I'm interested to see how they utilize him, what kind of coverages they put him in and things like that. But the other thing, and the biggest thing I'm most looking forward to, and it's something I've been harping on for weeks, I know, but I want to see how big Randy Gregory looks when he's in pads and a helmet. Not necessarily just standing by himself, but also in comparison when he gets out there in the game. I'm interested to see if he's going to be able to use his speed to run by, these offensive linemen, or if their size is just going to be too much for him. What are some, as we look forward to this, Josh, what is your interest level, I guess, in what we're going to see from the linebackers? Do you think the first team is going to be any sort of indicator of what we can expect opening night, or do you think this is going to be a completely open tryout, that this first game against the Chargers doesn't have any bearing on what the Cowboys do moving forward with that linebacker group, because it's completely open by all accounts?
Yeah, I think it's completely open, but I think the coaches kind of have an idea of what they're going to expect come opening day. I mean, there might be a few changes here and there, but I feel like they already have it hatched out in their head, unless something comes up, like maybe your guy comes in and steals a job or something. I don't know, but it's not going to be the same thing come down the road. It's going to be a completely different roster.
RJ, who do you think it's important on the roster currently? Who do you think that it's important for them, even though it is just the first preseason game and the first, the cut from, down to 70 is still a little ways off? Who do you think it's important for them to come out and make some sort of an impression in this game against the Chargers? Just make, maybe it's just a big hit. Maybe it's a pass deflection. Maybe it's a nice kick return. So who on the roster do you think it is important for them to really make some sort of an impression in this first game?
You're reading my mind a little bit, Bobby. I think it might have something to do with the special teams return game, because there's a lot of wide receivers trying to make this team. I know we've talked about before, we've already got Dez, Terrence, Cole Beasley, and Devin Street, kind of the top four locked up. I want to see Lucky Whitehead. He's got a lot of hype about him. I want to see him return some punts. I want to see him return some kicks. Can he fill that Dwayne Harris role that we lost when Dwayne left in New York? I want to see Antoine Goodley. I want to see George Farmer. The guy got the big guaranteed contract. I want to see these guys, because there's only, we're not carrying 7 wide receivers. So if we carry 6 wide receivers, who's going to take that spot? Because Lucky Whitehead seems to kind of have entrenched himself into one of those spots, but there's only one spot left. So I really want to watch the wide receiver unit as a whole, and I want to see how hungry they are. I feel like a guy like Bryant has kind of riled them up at training camp, and see if they learned anything from him to go show that they can make the 53-man roster a little bit further down the road.
Which I know Nick Harwell's a guy who in particular has said on social media and such that he's, really been motivated and encouraged by this opportunity to learn from Dez Bryant. But I do think the kick return game is where, what happens next Thursday, it's absolutely, it could have an impact moving forward on who makes this roster, because I think there is some concern about who's going to be, we hear these reports about Dez and Dunbar and Whitehead and all these different people that are running back kicks right now, because I think Jason Garrett honestly has no clue who's going to be running back kicks for them. So I think, if you're able to make an impression in the kick return game, in this game on Thursday against the Chargers, I think that could have significant bearing for a bubble guy to make it moving forward. We'll come back we'll be right back here on Cowboys Cast, presented by Inside the Star and Cowboys Nation.
Some
are back on Cowboys Cast, presented by Cowboys Nation and InsideTheStar.com. It's really nice to come back to quality country music compared to the garbage we went out to break with. Oh my goodness. Josh has been asking for some Eric Church for weeks, and I finally relented and put it in there, and goodness, that was...
Twitter sphere comes into my favor because Eric Church is the greatest.
That was I'm sorry, I can't operate with that. I mean, there may be an Eric Church band moving forward. I had no idea, but George Strait, George Strait's here to save all of you. All right, let's move on to something a little less controversial than Eric Church, music being played on Cowboys Cast, and that's the Des Bryant Tyler Patmon fight at training camp this last week. I say less controversial, sort of tongue-in-cheek. I mean, I don't think any Cowboys fans thought it was controversial. As any of you who have been following camp on Twitter or Facebook or anything else, or even gone to DallasCowboys.com, you'll see very prominently that Des Bryant and Tyler Patmon got into a little bit of a scrap at training camp. Blows were thrown by both of them. Helmets came off. And in the end, they hugged it out, and both of them went to the media and called him, said, "Oh, that's my brother." And sometimes brothers get into fights and things like that. And they seemed to squash it. Des even said that Tyler Patmon had earned his respect, and, it seemed to be a positive experience. Well, the national media and the Cowboys haters, they descended on that and talked about, oh, look at this, things are already blowing up at Cowboys camp. And, it's funny because days later, they're actually just about a day later, I think, we had a much more violent looking fight, to me anyway, at Giants camp that got no play. You may not know the fight I'm talking about because it hasn't been anywhere. It's not as big a deal. But, anything that happens with the Cowboys is all of a sudden a big deal. But here's one of the questions I want to address with both of you here is this idea that this could somehow be a little damaging, or maybe there's already some unrest, or even this claim that this has shown Dez's immaturity. I think that is garbage. I think this is just what happens when you have, football players practicing in the summer heat. It's just what goes on. And, every now and then there's going to be some disagreements or some testiness, and it happens. Josh, is this any sort of concern, or were you troubled by the footage of Des and Tyler Patmon getting into it?
I actually forgot about it until we just now talked about it.
I know. See, that's how meaningless it is to the rest of us. But go ahead.
I mean, I love it. I love seeing players fight because that means they have something, they have a passion in them, and they're getting into it. I love seeing that. I don't see anything wrong with it. RJ, did you have any concern with that? Do you think that's indicative of a greater problem? Do you think this is, some of these conspiracy theories on social media that, that hug, that was a concocted thing, and there's really some dissension there? Clearly, I mean, look, you don't throw punches at somebody that you're brothers with.
Well, first of all, I think the whole fallout speaks to how high-profile Dez has gotten. I mean, he got into a fight with J.J. Wilcox a year ago, and it didn't even hit a fraction of what this did.
Got in a fight with the Raiders a year ago, and it didn't get this much traction. Exactly.
But like Josh said, I actually kind of like it. And more than anything, I think for Tyler Patmon, it's kind of the Rod Marinelli in him and in all of them. Tyler Patmon, he's this, probably right now, fourth corner on the depth chart. And he's going after arguably the best receiver on this planet. Like he owns him. And he has that. I mean, it takes that mentality to play corner in the NFL. And so I really like it. But, more than anything, when Dez signed his new contract, it was, oh, thank God we had to have Dez at camp. He ups the intensity level like nobody we've ever seen before. And then he gets into a fight, and everyone is shocked and floored by it. Well, this is who Dez is. He brings that intensity all around. I'm getting anxious myself, just kind of, I'm all screaming and everything, because that's what Dez does. It's tangible, the effect that he has on everybody, and I just think that's what came out. It's competitiveness. I
don't know if either of you have brothers, but let me say that just on my end, I have 5 younger brothers, and I took a swing at every single last one of them at some point in my life, and they took a swing at me.
Were they Eric Church fans?
Yeah, all of them. They loved Eric Church, and I couldn't stand it. They listened to Eric Church while watching Giants games. It was unbearable.
Your brothers are good people.
Yeah, okay. But, I mean, it's one of those things where I just immediately had that thought. People, well, brothers don't treat each other. They absolutely do. I did it all my entire childhood growing up. It's what happens. You get into scraps, you make up, and you move forward. I mean, for goodness sakes, let's just go back to the 90s teams for a minute. Those Super Bowl winning 90s teams. Michael Irvin stabbed Everett McIver with scissors in the neck. Charles Haley got into a fight with Kevin Smith over the way he treated Jerry Rice. This is what happens. This is what teammates do. They have disagreements. They get into, and this one I think is even more understandable than a lot of the ones that have happened in the past. I mean, you get out there at camp. Everybody's, practice isn't the best thing in the world. Nobody thinks that's a whole lot of fun. And I'm sure, it can wear you down having to, snap and go out for the route and then come back and get into these little, hand checks and and it can get testy. This is what always happens in any sport. It's not even unique to football. And I think this, sort of what you were saying, RJ, that I think this more speaks to the level that Dez has risen to of prominence in the media and, with NFL fans, that a fight in practice somehow is a top story. Now, here's one other thing that I think is interesting to touch on. I believe it was Herm Edwards this week spoke with ESPN and had said that he thought it was a little silly or in poor taste for the Cowboys to highlight the fight and, put their own video of the fight up there, which was the best video we had. But very briefly, just a minute left. Josh and RJ, Josh first. Is that a little less than professional? Maybe there may be a point there for the Cowboys to highlight the fight. Is that a little going overboard, trying to play on the chatter about it on social media?
I don't think so. It's kind of their job. I mean, they're paid to write stuff about it, so I don't think it's an issue.
RJ, did you think there was any sort of maybe a little less than tactful for them to highlight the fight?
I think it's just steering into the skid, getting ahead of it before everybody else can do it, kind of putting your own angle on the story before anybody else can jump in and put theirs.
And perhaps that's what it was, because the fight was immediately followed up with quotes from Dez and Patmon talking about, how they're brothers and they respect each other and they love each other. We'll be right back on Cowboys Cast with the great Dan Turner. We're back on Cowboys Cast. I'm just going to let James Ingram serenade all of us for the next 15 minutes because that's awesome. I don't care what y'all say. I'm not even ashamed. All right. Joining us now on the Cowboys Nation hotline, once again, it's the great Dan Turner. Dan is a contributor for DallasCowboys.com and founder of NFL Draft Zone, and he is actually in Oxnard this time rather than the UK because training camp is underway, as we know, and he's here to just talk a little bit about what he's seen out there. Dan, how are you doing, and has the jet lag worn off yet?
Yeah, I'm doing very well, thank you. It's strange, I'm sort of sleeping 8 or 9 hours a night, but I still feel absolutely terrible. So,
and then just as you cycle back and get used to it, it's going to be time to go back home.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Dan, the biggest question heading into camp was, of course, who's going to be the number one running back? Is it going to be, before camp had started, some people were wondering, well, maybe it'll be Ryan Williams. That clearly didn't happen. Darren McFadden's been dinged up and unable to participate at this point. But is the running back position coming into focus at all between Dunbar and Randall? And I know Dunbar nicked his ankle on Wednesday, actually, late in practice. But what's your assessment of the running back position so far, what you've seen?
I think the only place which we don't really, or the only person who we don't really understand the role of yet is Darren McFadden. I mean, it sort of seems like Joseph Randall is going to be the feature back here. He's the one who is, in fact, he actually didn't have a very good day yesterday, but he was much better today, and he's showing sort of the vision to be able to get in the holes, and he's running this beautiful outside and inside zone, and his feet are just so good at the second level as well. So I think he had about 2 touchdowns today, both on long runs. So he's probably going to be the feature back. And then Lance Dunbar also looks extremely good here. I mean, he got nicked up today, but it was only a minor injury, so that shouldn't be too much of an issue. And he's going to be, I mean, I think everyone just thought he was going to be a third down back at first, like a change of pace guy, but he could actually be more than that. I mean, the Cowboys have used him with the first team on a number of occasions, and not just on obvious passing situations. And the other guy who has actually surprised, I think, quite a lot of people here is Lachey Seastrunk. I mean, I don't think he's been cut 3 times in just over a year, so I guess the expectations probably kept low for him, but he's been showing sort of surprising burst, and he's been able to make some big plays out here also. So, I mean, the longer Darren McFadden's going to be out, I think the more Seastrunk is going to be knocking on his door for the third running back spot.
So my attention this year going into camp was on Terrence Williams, but Cole Beasley seems to have stole the show. What have you seen from both players?
I think, although Terrence Williams has had the show stolen away from him by Cole Beasley, he is still the number 2 receiver on the team. I mean, I think a lot of people thought that Devin Street might be able to take it away from him, but Street's had a really bad camp so far. And I think the thing with Williams is that although we're going into the season, he might not get as many yards as Beasley, he might not get as many touchdowns as Beasley, but his job on the team is that when you need a big play, I think probably more than anyone, more than even Des, in fact, more than Witten, you can actually trust this guy to make a big play. I mean, he scored 3 touchdowns in the playoffs last year, so although it looks frustrating out here when he's body catching everything and he's having some issues, then I think he'll be fine going into the season. But the thing I say about Beasley, though, I mean, Beasley is probably, I think he's been in the top 5 players out here so far. I mean, Orlando Scandrick hasn't really had a good time, but that could just purely be because he's supposed to be covering Cole Beasley every time. And I mean, Beasley's route running is just improved. It's even improved from what it was last year. I don't think anyone has been able to actually cover him properly yet. And by the way, that isn't just on short routes either. He's actually being put on the outside and giving proper routes downfield, and he's still beating players there. So I think he could have a breakout year this year. But just back to the original question, I don't think that Terrence Williams' role is going to be diminished too much from what it was in previous years. It might just be with Romo's aging a little bit that he more looks to go to the guy who's always opening, Cole Beasley.
Hey Dan, it's RJ here. When you first got to camp, I saw you tweeted about DeMarcus Lawrence and his size and how big he looks. In the first couple of days, how has he looked next to a pass rusher like Greg Hardy? How has he looked next to Randy Gregory? You know, where does he kind of fit, and how big exactly does he look? Can you kind of talk about that a little bit?
Okay, well, I think DeMarcus Lawrence is the best pass rusher they have so far. And in fact,
better than Hardy?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's hard to actually judge Greg Hardy at the moment because Tyron Smith is the best player out in the field. I mean, he's actually on a different level to what Des is. Just to put that into perspective, I think Tyron Smith is probably going to be, if he plays into the season, then he's going to be pushing into top 5 players in the NFL this year. So again, it's hard to sort of judge Hardy, but I mean, from what I've been saying so far, Tyron Smith has been dominating the blind side, but DeMarcus Lawrence has been dominating the strong side. At the moment, he's just too quick and he's too strong for Doug Free. I don't think that's too much of a hit at Doug Free, really. I think it's more just that Lawrence is absolutely excelling here. I mean, when he came out of college, I think he was 245 pounds, and now he's pushing 270 pounds. So he does look different, but at the same time, somehow or other, he's actually now looks quicker as well. He's actually beating guys off the snap. He's beating Doug Free off the snap. He's beating Darian Weems off the snap. I think everyone would actually quite like to see him go on the blind side against Tyron Smith because that would actually be quite a serious battle at the moment. The way which DeMarcus Lawrence wins is basically with his hands. I mean, Jason Garrett's been talking this week about the use of heavy hands, so essentially being able to move people just with your hands alone, and that is DeMarcus Lawrence's entire game. That's how he got his sack last year against Detroit, and it's how he's getting most of his wins here. But he's also added a different facet, which is almost like a bit of a speed rush this year, where he's actually beating guys off the snap. So he's almost learning how to read cadences and read snap counts and things like that. So I'm extremely excited by DeMarcus Lawrence this year.
Well, Dan, and we're talking about another young defensive end here. One of my biggest questions heading into training camp, it wasn't his smarts, wasn't his ability, it was his size, and that's Randy Gregory. And so to this point, what you've seen there out at training camp, a couple questions. One, how is Randy Gregory adjusting? And then the bigger thing to me is, What's he looking like size-wise? Is he still looking like, an undersized Calvin Johnson, or has he actually put on some weight?
I'll answer the second question first, actually, and that's that in terms of size, I actually stood next to him yesterday, and you can tell that he's putting a lot of weight, and he's actually adding weight while here. I think this is one of the concerns, that when he gets to camp and he's practicing twice a day, he'll be able to lose weight. But he's actually already gained about 5 pounds since being here. So he's adding size all the time. Actually, on the field, he's probably been the best rookie here so far. I think he'd be challenging Damien Wilson for that spot. But at the moment he's holding Jeremy Mincy. If in nickel situations, he's basically playing right defensive end every single time. That's ahead of Jeremy Mincy. That's ahead of any of the one techniques. That's ahead of any of the sort of younger pass rushers. So I think he's had quite an impressive camp so far. He's still having a few issues, especially against Tyron Smith, because, like I say, Tyron Smith is just absolutely dominating here. So it's almost quite hard to judge how any of these guys are doing. But he's definitely trying. He's definitely adjusting his game as well. And to that extent, he's almost doing a little bit better than what Greg Hardy's doing, because he's trying to find out how to beat Tyron Smith. He isn't actually succeeding. That's the funny thing, because every time he tries to counter move or try something different against Tyron Smith, Tyron just counters it with something else. But at least he's actually trying. At least he's actually showing some initiative, really, to try and actually win out here.
So, Dan, I know a guy you're really excited about is F.A. Obata. Has there been any obvious learning curves from what you've seen in practice or drills?
Yeah, there has been, to be honest. I think I wasn't really expecting high things of him here. I think I was sort of expecting practice. I think that is almost what he's showing here, without trying to sound harsh. But, today he had a rush against, I think it was John Wetzel, and he's basically, almost one of the first times I've seen, he's actually able to win off the snap. And then he did a speed to power move on John Wetzel, which basically just left Wetzel on the ground. And I think it's actually quite exciting what F.A. Obata can actually do here, because I don't really think the NFL has probably seen many better athletes than him. He runs a 1.53 second 10-yard split, for example, and he's 260 pounds or something like that. So he's going to be exciting to watch, but I don't think you can expect much this season, though, just purely because he just doesn't understand. He doesn't have enough pass rush moves. He doesn't almost have the knowledge of the game yet. But I think one of his big strengths, though, which I've seen so far, is that, and this is something which a lot of these younger guys don't have, and that's he has an anchor. He'll lose off the snap. He'll play with high pad levels. But you never see him get driven back. It doesn't matter who he's playing against on the edge. He can always just station there and not get moved back, which is quite impressive, really, for his size.
So, Dan, staying on the defensive side of the ball, one guy who's been in the news a lot lately is Tyler Patmon. And Broadus and a bunch of other people, they've talked about how great he's looked. And so, can you kind of talk about what you're seeing from him and how he fares against a guy like Dez, how he fares against Terrence, and how he stacks up against the other corners on the team?
Well, I know that he's Bobby's best friend, so I can't speak too bad against him. But yeah, he's doing okay. I think at the moment he's probably holding off Byron Jones at cornerback, and I think that when they have put him against someone like Dez or one of the better receivers, he's held his own. I think Tyler Patmon has, which I love in a cornerback, is he's such a fighter. I don't just mean that because he went up in a punch up with Des Bryant the other day, but he's just such a fighter on the field. He won't give up at any play, and then as soon as he does have a bad play, he gets it straight away and goes on to the next one. He's almost like the opposite of Mo Claiborne, without trying to sound harsh to Mo Claiborne either, but this is a guy who he doesn't suffer with confidence issues at all. And like I say, I think another thing as well is that he always looks for the big play. I'm not sure what his role is going to be this year, because I think with Byron Jones, they can try him out in different positions. So they've tried Byron Jones trying to put in linebacker and safety. With Corey White, they've also tried him at free safety as well. So it almost means that with Tyler Patmon, unless there's injuries, he's not going to be any better than probably the dime cornerback on the field. But I think that what he's probably trying to show at the moment is that when Brandon Carr or Mo Claiborne or Mo Claiborne get cut or don't get renewed next year, that Tyler Patmon might be able to have a more significant role with the team.
Now, one of the other big competitions Cowboys fans have had their collective eyes on is the left guard spot. I know Leary came out on Wednesday and told the Dallas Morning News that this is his spot and he's not giving it up. But has Leary or Collins, which of the two has seen the majority of the snaps with the first team? And have you taken much notice of their play and who's possibly winning that position battle?
Well, in simple, Ron Leary is a better run blocker, but La'el Collins is a better pass blocker. So I almost think that it was whichever one almost showed enough in the other facet of their game. And so far, Ron Leary has actually been the best. He seems to have improved his pass blocking quite significantly, and he's basically seeing every snap with left guard. So I don't think the Cowboys. I think this season, I don't think La'el Collins is going to start at left guard for the Cowboys unless there's an injury there, which obviously is the chance of. But it's nothing against what La'el Collins is doing. It's just that, I mean, he hasn't really stuck out so far. I think it's probably hard to. I think in college he was a dominant run blocker, but you don't really. I think almost the fact that the pads haven't come on yet, he seems to be a little bit tentative in his run blocking. So I think it'll be interesting to see what he does in the pre-season and stuff like that. But if you were hopeful that he was going to start ahead of Ron Leary, I don't think there's much of a chance of that.
So last time we talked, we were fresh into the draft, and we talked about Green and Gibson. I believe you were higher on Gibson than Green. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it's higher on Green.
Okay, you're high on Green, but with Green on the PUP, what have you seen from Gibson so far?
Yeah, Gibson has struggled a little bit so far, actually, but I think we sort of always had a feeling that was going to happen. I mean, he only started for 1 year in college, so he's still almost learning the game. I mean, from a physical perspective, he looks perfect. He has long arms, he's athletic, he's tall, so he can do a lot of things. But his issue is that he's almost so raw in way too many places. So for instance, when he can get beaten off the snap quite easily. People who more experienced pass rushers are beating him off the snap, and he's also getting too high with his pad level, and then he can get pushed back. So he has had quite a few sort of rookie issues so far, and I think he's probably more likely to go to the practice squad unless he improves on a number of those issues, unless they want to don't let anyone try and steal them off them and put him and stash him on the 53.
Dan, how has Sean Lee looked? You know, we've heard a lot about how they're taking things slowly with him and being very careful with him, but what have you seen from him out there?
I mean, well, first of all, it's just great to have him on the field. I think that's first and foremost with Sean Lee. They haven't really used him that much. I think they're trying to edge him on. I mean, even in interviews, Sean Lee isn't interviewing at the moment, so I don't think he wants to say anything. I don't think he wants to get his expectations up too high. But I mean, he is. It's nice to see him out there. It's nice to see him hitting. It's nice to see his intelligence at work. But I think the show has almost been stolen away from him a little bit by how well Davian Wilson has looked. I mean, Wilson has basically been spelling Lee as the first team will linebacker when Lee hasn't been on the field, which is very often. And Davian Wilson is just stealing the show here for me. I think as much as I don't want Sean Lee to get injured, I think if he did get injured this year, you'd be more confident than you were last year when he got injured.
All right. Well, Dan Turner, we really appreciate you coming on. It's always a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of Oxnard and try and get some sleep.
Thanks, guys.
All right, I'll talk to you. We'll return right after this on Cowboys Cast. There's less than 2 minutes remaining. We have no timeouts left, so I got to run through all this really quickly. First off, Twitter. You can find me. I am at Sports by Dallas. RJ is at RJ Ochoa. Josh is at Josh Wingate _302. You can also check out Cowboys Nation on Twitter at Cowboys Nation. I also neglected at the end of that interview with Dan to tell you where you could find him on Twitter. He is at DTS Turner, and he is a must follow. Fellas, the game coming up here against the Chargers on Thursday night. You know, we're looking for a breakout player. Josh, who's your breakout player? Who are you looking for to make an impact in the game?
I think it's going to be Tyler Patmon with a 6 pick.
Oh, very big. And RJ, who's your pick?
I think Ryan Russell. I think he's going to get a strip sack fumble, the hat trick.
Oh, that would be so great. I really like Ryan Russell, and it was a great joy talking to him after he was drafted. My pick is I'm going to go out on a ledge and say Lucky Whitehead runs back a kick, and I think that solidifies his spot on the roster. As usual, check us out at InsideTheStar.com. RJ continues the countdown of the best players to wear every number in the history of the Cowboys franchise. And we will talk to you next week. This has been Cowboys Cast, presented by Cowboys Nation and InsideTheStar.com.